What up, y'all? Hope everything is going well. A little bit of a informal upload today. Just recording a little voice memo. I'm out at a retreat in Northeast Oklahoma, and there was just some of the teaching today that was just really, really resonating with me that I was feeling from the Lord just to share on here in just like an organic way. And just do it today rather than waiting to get home, because it's something that just was hitting me so much. And it's the Lord over the last almost a year or so, I feel like, has been impressing on me about love, and just what love is, what it looks like, maturing in love, loving one another as Jesus loved us, as it says in John 15. The fact that 1 Corinthians 13, we can, know all prophecies, we can have all these gifts, we can do all these things, but if we don't have love, we're nothing. And it's a fruit, as it says in Galatians 5. And it's something that we grow into as character, as it says in 2 Peter 1, where it's talking about all these virtues that we have as we're walking with the Lord. And, to virtue add knowledge, all this stuff, and it culminates add brotherly affection, to brotherly affection add love. For if these qualities, these character qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful in the way that we should walk. And so love is just I've seen a renewed centralness to love in our walk, and in so many different ways, where it's more than just emotions, but also it is an emotional thing. It's a spiritual thing, but it's also a physical thing. It's a character thing, but it's also, a gift type thing. It's also it's holistic, and it's central to who we are. And something that one of the guys who's leading this retreat shared last night and this morning that just wrecked me, that was so mind-changing, was love is the one commodity and expression that can't be wasted. True love is the one thing that can't be wasted. And he was kind of walking through how so many times, we have these questions or we have these doubts of whenever we get out of a relationship or whenever someone responds in a way that we don't expect to our loving act towards them, oh, was this wasted? Did this have an effect? Was this really what I should have done? But the thing is, in its simplest form, if we look at Jesus on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But at the same time, he didn't wait until they apologized to continue in love, to continue loving them. And obviously, another big example is at the Last Supper with Judas. How many of us would have felt I just walked with this guy for 3 years and he's already, he's about to betray me. Nah, I ain't going to wash his feet. I'm not going to do any of this. We would start to think, is this love wasted? Is all these 3 years wasted? What was the point of this? I'm just not going to do this anymore. And it's interesting because there's so many jumping off points from that, but even in that goes to this, I feel for me, this topic of boundaries and a lot of other things, but also guarding your heart. And what does this look like? Me, whenever I look at Jesus, he did have some sort of, boundaries of, withdrawing from people and spending time with the Father in prayer, but it wasn't out of response of people treating him poorly. And so many times today, whenever someone treats us poorly, whenever we don't get the respect or the care that we feel we deserve, we retreat and we're okay, well, I'm just going to put up boundaries and not really care for this person because they don't care about me. Whenever it's no, so many more times I feel the Lord calls us to obedience, calls us to sacrifice rather than mutually beneficial relationships. And one of the kind of slogans that the guy who's leading this is saying is for us as Christians to lead with love, follow that up with mercy, and then truth, and all of that from that foundation of friendship, from brotherhood, all of that is built. And in it, for example, going towards this boundaries talk even more, like if we look at the prodigal son, this son was, not stewarding things well, being very disrespectful towards his father, with being like, hey, give me my inheritance and I'm going to peace out. But whenever he came back, there wasn't like this sort of thing of the father being like, okay, do you know what you did wrong? Can you tell me how you're not going to do this again? And can you go through a 6-month rehab process? Like, no, the father was like welcoming him in with open arms, like, hey, let's throw a party. Let's be grateful for this. Let's be glad and trust the Spirit to continue to work in him, not me feel like I have to make sure that he understands what's going on wrong. And even in that, is there time for correction? Is there time for sharing wisdom? Is there time for submitting things to people? Yes, but so many other times it's just we wonder, like, out of this doubt of like, was my love wasted? Like we make this stuff happen, and out of it, like, something that hit me is I feel like the only time that we sort of hold back love, like the only time that we hold back our love after a conflict or after a fight or whatever is like if you feel like your love was wasted and if your love is limited. Like, really, after a conflict, after a blow up, after whatever, like if we're holding back love from people, if we feel like we have to put up boundaries or whatever, really that's us doubting if we can continue to love the other person. Like, they're like, okay, I don't know if I can keep doing this, man. They're putting me through some trash. But the thing is, in that moment, we should be seeking the Lord to be like, okay, like, what is your heart in this? Rather than us saying, okay, well, I'm going to stop making this commitment to him because, this friend's treating me like crap and this and that. And again, there's a balance in this. But a couple other things that just I want to share in this is, like, we talked about this idea of like metrics of waste, that, we think and we reflect on whenever it comes to relationships of like, okay, if this person, like if these things aren't present, there's a sort of waste, and we need to do away with these things. There's like, okay, if this relationship isn't efficient, like if they're not growing in the right timing that, I would want them to grow in or expect them to grow in, or if they're not, taking into account my time and what it's worth and all this kind of stuff, if they're not being as efficient as I like to, like, that's something where it's like, okay, well, this is a waste, and I guess, like, I should stop pouring love into this. Also, kind of a similar note off of that is like just progress, where if we feel like they're not making progress as much as or as quickly as we think they should, then we start to slowly or quickly like pull back love from that person, because they're like, okay, well, I guess they just don't have the potential to grow, or they're not receiving this love in the way that they should. And also in the allocation of love, being like, okay, I guess, I have, this tank of love here, and I'm going to just allocate less towards this person, whenever in reality, if we're being led by the Holy Spirit, following the example of Jesus, we should have unconditional love, which is something that is a tough mark to reach. But as we strive for that in fear and trembling, it's something that is literally, it's unconditional. And the only way that we can know if our love is unconditional is when conditions arise. That's when it's tested. It's not tested in the good times. It's tested whenever conditions arise. It's tested whenever your kid comes up after tearing the doorknob off the door, being like, hey, can you help me with this? Do you still love me? And all of that. I think a couple other things for me that was also like revealed in this is, I feel like I struggle, and maybe y'all relate in this, like I struggle with loving someone who doesn't want to get better. I was reflecting on this where I kind of felt like there's, a couple communities of people in the world where they struggle with X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, dang, well, I really struggle with loving these people. But then I reflected on it more. I'm like, well, no, because there's this person with this sort of similar through line issue that I can love well. And so what was the difference between, that person and others? And it was, okay, well, this person is genuinely wanting to grow with the Lord and get better. Whereas these other people that I struggle with having patience with, they don't want to get better. They just want to stay in what they're doing. And they don't feel like it's not wrong, or a variety of things. And so that's something that the Lord is kind of growing in me, of having that patience and that unconditional love in that way. But then also, a last kind of encouragement related to like love can't be wasted is love can't be wasted even if the situation doesn't turn out the best or how we think it should have. Basically, whenever we feel like we can only love someone whenever the situation turns out how they should, that's pride there. That's us being like, okay, we bested the situation. We accomplished this, we did this. Whenever it's like, no, like loving people, even when it's not the best, is amazing. And what that allows the person to do is, even if they see how much you hurt in this or how much it impacted you, that then gives them the opportunity to be like, oh, this person is really with me. It allows them to reflect and potentially even surrender to the Lord in that moment and surrender to true love. And oftentimes, like in those situations, people have only encountered a false version of love. People have been like, okay, well, the last time this situation come up, the person abandoned me, or whatever it looks like. And so it makes it tough. And from there, the last kind of 2 points that I'll bring up is it made me think of this question of what is like the rap that we have as the church at this point? Is it that we don't love enough, or is it that we've compromised on issues? So where it's funny, like at this retreat, I've heard a lot of these guys say like, okay, I feel like everyone outside of the church says, okay, the church doesn't love enough, the church doesn't love enough. But then whenever I reflect back to home and what, the people within the church say towards the church, they're like, oh, we've compromised on XYZ issue. And I'm just kind of here thinking like, okay, well, like which one is more accurate? And because I think they're both accurate to a degree, but in that is like, okay, well, depending on potentially which one of those issues we're trying to seek the Lord and resolve for, like that's two different ways of walking. And so kind of made me think like, does the self-image that the church has of ourselves actually reflect who we are? Or is there this distorted picture that we're looking at ourselves through and at, to where the world sees an entirely different view of us than what we see of ourselves? And so that was a really humbling thing. And then kind of from there, we got into, okay, if we're dealing with, this person, this, like, how do we hate the sin, love the person? If there's, these very specific situations, what does it look like to love this person in this moment? Like, is this a moment to share truth with them? Is this a moment to bear their burdens with them? Is this a moment to be patient? Is this a moment to correct? Like, what does it all look like in these specific moments? And one of the guys said, like love is being led by the Spirit, not following a systematic rule, like ruling base or formula. There's not like a systematic thing to this. It's us entering that relationship with Jesus and following him as a person. And that's the thing, is like, whenever Jesus gave us the commandment, whenever he gave the disciples the commandment, it was, hey, follow me. It wasn't, hey, follow this way of life that you've been taught. He invited them to a relationship. He invited them into a dynamic that is changing, and not changing in terms of the truth is changing, but changing in terms of how do I care for this person? How do I prioritize people in this? And so it's something that is what the Father is. Like the Father is Abba to us. primarily before he is a creator judge, or before he's, everlasting almighty. Like, whenever Jesus taught the disciples how to pray, the first thing that he told them to say is our Father, not our creator, not our judge, not almighty. He said our Father. And so it's just been, even I haven't even been here for 24 hours yet, and yet it's wrecked me a lot. And I was just really feeling from the Lord to share some of this to y'all. And just help us to grow in not attaching expectations to our love, to our acts of love. And there's just so much that I have to grow in love. Granted, I think all of us do. And so, a little bit of like a organic, quick voice memo style podcast. So I hope y'all enjoy it. Hope this can be encouraging. So until next time, much love. God bless.